Well, it took 190 hours over several months, but I finally finished Fire Emblem Three Houses and wanted to talk a little bit about what I thought. To give some context, this was my first Fire Emblem game. I had heard of the franchise for some time, but never really thought it was my cup of tea. After some hounding from my friends, I eventually decided I would give it a whirl. Also, I did not pick up and have no interest in picking up the DLC, but from what I've been told, it doesn't affect what I'm going to say too much. Mechanically, I thought everything was great. It was very easy to pick up on and rather self-intuitive. The music was enjoyable, although I'll get a little bit more on its placement and usage later. All in all, I didn't really have any issues with the game from a games mechanics standpoint. So you're probably wondering then, what is with the title? Three Houses Wasted Potential. Well, for that, we'll delve into the routes themselves. Spoilers for all of them from here on out. I will cover them in the order that I played them in. Blue Lions, Golden Deer, Black Eagles, and then Silver Snow. With that, let's jump right in. So, for Blue Lions, I have to confess this is my favorite route of the four, and arguably the strongest of the four routes in terms of character setup and delivery. The story focuses around Dimitri's ruined state and his eventual redemption back into the ruler he was meant to be. We experience sacrifice and consequences that arise from his narrow-minded, revenge-oriented view at the start. I actually really like that touch in Blue Lions, how there's that nameless NPC who asks to come with you for revenge, only for Dimitri to get blindsided by the fact that said NPC was trying to get revenge on him for killing her brother, and it is one of many events that snap Dimitri out of his vengeance-honed mindset. Things like Dedue returning on the bridge brought a smile to my face as well, as everything was pretty solidly focused around telling the story of Dimitri's redemption. I mean, from a gameplay perspective, I felt that Dedue was still alive because, man, what a dick move that would be just to give him support and then nope him out of there. But even with that, I still couldn't help but smile and feel a little bit uplifted when our boy came back onto the bridge, ready to serve and kickstarting the healing in Dimitri's heart. Additionally, I thought the character dynamic was actually really nice. Everyone felt like they had a reason to be there. The only real exception to this, I felt, was Mercedes, but with her being the most pious of the bunch, it was fitting she belonged with them. Her friendship with Annette, who has a tie back to Dimitri, also helped solidify her place. Overall, Blue Lines tells Dimitri's story and how his friends stayed with him, reaching out very well, and him rising to the task set out for him. The story pacing never felt rushed, nor did it drag out for too long. However, this all comes at a price. Namely, we never really get to tackle the real villains of the story, those who slither in the dark. They're mostly just left as a footnote, and while we deal with Cornelia, who is ultimately one of their lackeys, we never really get that direct confrontation with them that ties directly into the story. To me, this is important because everything ultimately started with them. It would have been some very good closure for Dedue as his people were scapegoated, or at least heavily implied to have been, by those who slithered in the dark, and as Dimitri's loyal retainer and friend, it would have been nice to have seen Dimitri and Dedue really put an end to the ones who caused this tragedy in their lives. That's of course just a wish, but I think that Blue Lions was solid overall. It just needed a bit more to make it really stick. There's a bit more that I'd like to say, but I think it's best mentioned when I go over the other routes as a good contrast to what I disliked in them. Now, to me, Golden Deer has sort of the opposite problem. While Golden Deer does focus a lot on Claude, Claude doesn't have as much of a character arc as Dimitri does. Rather, Golden Deer puts its focus more on the events as Claude goes on with his schemes and pulls everyone along for the ride. It covers a lot more ground story-wise than Blue Lions, but it comes at the expense of the characters. Because of how much we need to cover, we don't have time to sit down for a bit and explore what they think. The pacing feels a bit off as well because we have to deal with defeating Edelgard, so we can deal with the underground party-hard dubstep mole people. Additionally, I felt the characters didn't feel as connected. Everyone in Blue Lions had a reason for being there, as I said before, but everyone in Golden Deer felt like a thrown-together mess. Of course, this was acceptable in that they're more of a ragtag group of misfits as a class, but I think some time needed to be spent really bringing everyone together and establishing a real group bond to them. This, I believe, is a symptom of Claude not having that much in terms of character growth. With Dimitri, his A-rank supports are locked until he actually gets better and snaps out of his funk. Their unlocking represents the fact he has opened up his heart up again, and he can connect with his friends once again. This doesn't happen in Golden Deer outside of Liz, whose plot involvement is really what Golden Deer needed more of, character investment in Claude's triumph. For Liz, when those who slither in the dark are discovered, she's got a real motive to go after them and help put an end to all of it. For the Blue Lions, Dimitri is their king and he's hunted down by Edelgard. They still believe he is their righteous king and or friend, and they want the best for him, to be put on the throne, and thus their involvement in everything that happens is secured. Things like Rodriguez dying and Felix telling him not to make his sacrifice in vain, things like that. Those events are what really Golden Deer needed. However, like I said, we don't have time for this in Golden Deer, as we have too much to get through in terms of story events. Also, personal note, but man, I felt like they disrespected Dimitri hard in this route. I get that here, he doesn't have you to snap him out of his revenge tunnel vision, but it felt just wrong, and all we really get is a dialogue line that's like, hey, by the way, he dead, and I think Dorothea will talk about it too. But like I said, that's not a lot. We don't really have any time to reflect on it. We have to keep going. I think really what we needed here was just a chapter in the middle on the way to taking the fort in the next map. Not really a breather, but just an easier map and month, complete with some paralogs for each person who's alive, to kind of just think about the fact that they had to kill their former classmates and that Dimitri, head of one of the houses 5 years ago, is dead. If you really want to be ambitious, add in pairs, like you get a different paralog for if you currently have Ingrid and Raphael with the most support, rather than, say, Ingrid and Sylvain. This way, each character can reflect just a little bit more on what the hell happened, and if you're really into the shipping game, this can be a little more of a tease as each pair helps each other get through this tough time. Arguably, this can be done in the Blue Lions route as well. However, I feel it isn't as necessary, as we already have Dimitri's own story advancing, which is done by the nameless NPC, as mentioned at the start. I think if you want to do this in Blue Lions, you can, but it would be best saved for students who were recruited into the house. If you want to do paralogs for the students of Blue Lions and how they react to Dimitri recovering, that works too, but I feel that the A-rank support conversations already convey this. One rather egregious thing that I thought was pretty silly in Golden Deer was right before we storm Edelgard's palace, we had this big conversation of how we'll try not to kill her unless necessary. And then, one map later, honestly, talking it over with some friends, we thought that the one time Edelgard could really have been recruitable was right here. The Golden Deer house is basically mopping up and the bigger enemy is right there. From the other routes, we know that Edelgard hates those who slither in the dark. If there was any chance for a recruiting Edelgard moment, it was here. And I think having a cutscene where Claude tries to appeal to her with his idea of breaking down barriers between the nations would have been great to add here. Hell, if you want to get really ambitious, rework the storyline so Dimitri doesn't die, and here you can make a really pivotal choice. You can either kill Edelgard or spare her. Throughout the rest of the route, you can spare a former ally, so that would have been a great moment to have here. If you spare Edelgard, you have to contend with Dimitri. If you kill Edelgard, then Dimitri joins you in the final battle to take vengeance on those who started everything. You could also add something about how Claude and you aren't letting Edelgard walk away scot-free from all of this. She had a hand in how everything went down due to working with those who slither in the dark, and so she better damn well do something to fix this mess too. But this is where the pacing rears its ugly head again. We get all of 2 chapters to really deal with those who slither in the dark, and considering how they are the masterminds behind most, if not all of the shenanigans, it really sucks that we don't get as many direct confrontations with them. I get they are a shadowy group tucked away, but I think this is why Golden Deer should have focused more on them. Schemers versus schemers. Claude's main shtick is that he's a schemer, and a damn good one. Early on, it's also established that he's looking deeper into the mysteries of the Church of Seros. If I were to construct a Golden Deer route from scratch, I'd place an earlier emphasis on them. When you and Claude talk at the monastery after the time skip, you could have something like him letting you know that while Edelgard was the one who invaded, that those who slither in the dark were pulling the strings the whole time. He might not have the full bigger picture, but there's a bigger threat than what everyone knows. While there's no way for him to take them on right now, he reckons that if 2 of you can scheme up something that forces those who slither in the dark out into the open, then they'll have an easier time trying to unite everyone together. Hell, maybe even Claude mentions if they link Edelgard and those who slither in the dark, and they publicize it, especially because her whole thing is screw the crest system, blaming the Church of Saros for it, and publicizing that she worked with the people who did highly morally bankrupt experiments on children for crests could be seen as massively hypocritical. It might be so distasteful that her empire turns on her, which is when you two will come in to save her like dashing knights, giving her a chance to prove that she really has her people in mind by aiding in the fight. Alternatively, if you don't like Edelgard, you could choose to leave her to the wolves and instead just simply take the resources of the empire that are left behind to fight against those who slither in the dark. Maybe another part of his scheme is forcing Dimitri to see the truth of who's really responsible and getting him to put down his grudge. Perhaps add some paralogs that act as flags, or even some conversations that act as flags, wherein they become recruitable after you deal with them and ultimately contribute to Claude's goal of shattering the barriers between people. If you don't do them, they aren't recruitable and somewhat go home. Dimitri ultimately survives. It feels empty after the whole ordeal, though has the remnants of his kingdom to look after. Edelgard at least has her members of her house, as her empire has mostly fallen away, or worse, want her dead assuming you saved her, leaving you to take the reins while Claude does his thing in distant lands. All in all though, those who slither in the dark come out earlier, and it becomes like a chess battle between them and Claude, allowing for better pacing when it comes to dealing with them. A lot of it might be sneaking around both the Empire and Kingdom's territory, as you can't be trusted on each side, which plays up to Claude's nature. As for the final battle, I think it's fine to keep it with Nemesis. However, I think the way the music was handled could have been a little bit better. I can already feel everyone booing me. I think that yes, God-Shattering Star was a good track and definitely fit for a finale, but I think it came in just a bit too early. Here's how I would have handled the music for the final battle. You've got 12 enemy commanders and one final map boss. Start the battle off with the music very heavy on the wub-wub dubstep, much like the previous map. They clearly have the upper hand, and so the music is tilted heavily in their favor. However, in the background every now and then, some soft piano and an orchestra using the leitmotif of the game, or even a piano arrange of God-Shattering Star, break through. You're not out of the fight just yet. As you take out the first 4, the music shifts, and slowly the instruments start to get the upper hand over the electronics. This happens again once 4 are left. Once you take out the last one, it kicks into the opening vocals of God-Shattering Star, but with a spike of the vocals timed with the armor break sound effect as Nemesis' shield goes down to really sell it that you're in the home stretch. Maybe make the map long enough that you get to hear some of the music before you lay down the smackdown, or give him multiple health bars to accomplish the same effect, just so you can hear the full track. Granted, I basically stole this sequence from Ace Combat 7, Mission 19, and mimicked the effects of Daredevil, but tried to do so for something slower paced in-game. I remember reading also something about Octopath Traveler doing something similar for its music, where no matter when you advance the dialogue in high-tension moments, the transition will always hit to provide maximum impact. Adding something like that, along with the push and pull of these instruments, could have made a really good battle into something that was great and unforgettable with just a little bit of tweaking. I still liked it overall, but it just didn't hit home as much for me. Ultimately, this is why Golden Deer came in second place for me. It just didn't feel as tight as Blue Lions, and really left me feeling like there was something more that needed to be done despite covering more ground. Of course, I still felt satisfied afterwards, but perhaps not as satisfied as Blue Lions. It's not like the route left me feeling angry or anything, like Black Eagles did. This one had to be my least favorite route by far, and I am thankful it's the shortest because I was glad to have it over with. I remember starting the route off with howling laughter, with the choice you're given to even get on the route. You get to choose between I must protect Edelgard and I must kill Edelgard, which, made me laugh my ass off. Somehow, I must protect Edelgard turns into, by the way, I'm gonna point my sword at Rhea rather than just step in the middle and tell everyone to calm down. I got flashbacks to Comfort Misha, if anyone still remembers that. I could tell I was gonna be in for a wild ride from this first cutscene. It didn't really feel like there was any build-up to it or anything. Was it too much to ask for one scene where you try to talk Rhea down and say Edelgard's your student? Both of them truly believing in you to make what they view as the right choice, and then if you really believe Rhea's in the wrong, then you can make that choice to side with Edelgard. I think something better too would have been to utilize a battle map for it after everyone has their discussion. Just you, Rhea, and Edelgard on the field. The objective, choose your own path. You can talk with each one again for final remarks, but ultimately the path you choose comes from who you choose to strike down. I think that would have been a much more hard-hitting moment. Perhaps when you do choose to fight somebody, you hear Sothis' voice reminding you that you promised to cut open a path of your own choosing, and a single dialogue option telling her that you did so, even if you're pretty sure she can't hear you. I have to say, too, that really the whole reason that Sothis sacrificed herself, I felt it was purely to facilitate the Black Eagle's route. I can't prove this, but it feels that way. Can you imagine what Black Eagles would have been like if you had Sothis in the back of your head saying this is all wrong? Especially because she started to figure out who she is. Though, I think, honestly, Black Eagles would have been a lot more interesting and better that way. Perhaps Sothis trusts you in that you're making the right choice somehow, but really wonders if this is the best path. Just that little voice of questioning always, as she doubts this is the best way to go, and she also continually prods you about working with those who slither in the dark, and you have to justify it somehow. Then, at the finale, as Rhea goes full senile, Sothis accepts that while she doesn't like what's going on, that at this rate this is the best and really only path forward. Honestly, the one thing I really disliked about this route too is that it felt like everyone in this route is just dumb. I joke around saying that this is the route Rhea goes senile because that's what it really feels like. And sure, you can justify it by saying Rhea snapped after her beloved creation, turned on her as well. But if you take that approach, then it undermines Edelgard's whole shtick where she's trying to destroy what she views as a societal evil on the land. Now instead of having a real moral conflict, whether or not the crest system with all of its flaws is actually useful and all of the weight that comes with that, you're just dealing with an insane woman-child of a ruler who people happen to listen to, which takes away from this great potential struggle of who's ultimately right in the end. Speaking of Edelgard's whole shtick, remember how I talked about how Blue Lions focused heavily on the characters and Golden Deer focused a lot more on plotline events? Well, for Black Eagles, take Golden Deer, but accelerate the pace threefold and take away any amusement. That amusement's all out the window because instead of the lovable rogue Claude who can always bring a smile, all you're left with is Edelgard's single-minded crusade with no room for anything else. Think you can offset it with some character arc? Nope. Edelgard's character arc is about as flat as a washboard. She never wavers, never rethinks, never doubts, and never has to really face the consequences of her actions. Perhaps the most humanizing moment in her route came in the final cutscene, where after you defeat Rhea, your heart stopped and you collapse. That was honestly the most you could feel for her. It was a moment of hesitation on her part, and the expression on her face had a "what have I done" moment on it. Whether or not it was worth sacrificing you in the end. But it doesn't feel earned, which is what I'm going to talk about here, and that your relationship with Edelgard feels off. I could feel something was off, especially right at the start, when it's Hubert who tells you that you're straight up working with the dudes who killed your dad. I honestly thought that was stupid. Edelgard, who puts a lot of hope on you, couldn't get herself to tell us herself. She just had her secretary do it, and we just accept it without question. They killed our dad, the man in our life who we shed our first tears for, and we apparently just let it go. And I think this goes into why this route is so unenjoyable from a character perspective, and why I say the relationship with Edelgard feels off. You don't bond with Edelgard, or at least you never feel it. With Dimitri, you're there for him always, and you get to watch his growth during the school year and his faltering as revenge starts to get the better of him. He puts a lot of faith in you and wants not to disappoint you, his teacher during his sane years. It's why it hurts to see him at his worst. You've seen him better and you want him to recover. Claude as well develops a friendly bond with you, where you two walk and talk before the final battle post-time skip. Even when he's using you for his schemes, he's upfront about it and is friendly to you, so that you feel it's mutual, and you're doing this as allies, but more importantly, as friends. You don't get that with Edelgard. You just feel like a tool used for her ends, and it's convenient for her that you like her enough to side with her or agree with her. And that is especially highlighted, when it's Hubert who tells you, not Edelgard. If Edelgard actually gave a damn, she would have marched down there and told it to your face, and asked that you look over it for now. There will be a time for the two of you to go after that threat, but that time is not now. For now, you both have to deal with Rhea, and she hopes you understand. But no, she just has her boy toy secretary do it for her, and to me this spoke volumes of what her character actually was. She's hard to sympathize with even in her own route because of how silly her reasoning is, and then on top of that, like I said, you don't have a friendship in the story. Now, when I say silly reasoning, it's moments where she talks about how she didn't have a choice. She did. She's the one who invaded and started this war to begin with. Or when talking with Liz in their support ranks, how she sneakily doesn't correct Liz, blaming the crest and nobility system for her suffering, which, if you ask me, those who slid in the dark would have done it regardless of whether or not the crest system was a thing. Easily the most egregious of these is when she tells Dimitri, if only we were born in a time of peace, you might have lived a joyful life as a benevolent ruler, when she is the one who started the damn war. Like, Edelgard, do you hear yourself talk? You don't get to talk about living in peace when you're the one who instigated peacetime being broken. Also, going back to character for a second, it might be a bit nitpicky, but they really should have limited your character selection. I can understand someone like Sylvain joining you in Black Eagles because of what happened with his brother, and some other characters as well, but people like Ingrid, of all people, should be someone who leaves your house for the shit you pull. I'd also argue that characters like Ash, Mercedes, Annette, Raphael, Ignatz, and Leonie would be people who leave as well, especially since it's out there in the open Edelgard's clearly working with the clearly shady evil dudes. Speaking of the clearly shady evil dudes, you know how Edelgard alludes to dealing with them later? Well, guess what? You never actually get to take the fight to them. The one satisfaction this route could have had. Where now that we're in control and we can fight the true enemy lurking in the shadows. And we are robbed of it. All in all, I disliked this route because it punished me for thinking. Never a moment for Edelgard to actually wonder if this is all worth it. Never a moment for someone to bring up anything that might cause her to falter. Never a moment for someone of any actual sanity to step up to the plate to oppose Edelgard. It's all just follow Edelgard blindly. Now, I hear you say, what's the difference between Claude and Edelgard? We mostly follow Claude blindly, trusting in his schemes, and to that I highlight the character dynamics. While Golden Deer and Black Eagles are fairly loose as a class, as in they aren't tightly coupled like Blue Lions. At least in Golden Deer, everyone follows Claude, understanding that he's a good schemer, and you can see that they have some faith in him to pull it off, and there's a sense of camaraderie between them all. You don't have that much at all in Black Eagles. Everyone feels like they're there because they're there, or they're obligated to be there. There's a similar dynamic in Golden Deer, but it feels less egregious because, again, there's a sense of familiarity and classmateship between them. For a comparison overall, Blue Lions feels like a family, Golden Deer feels like a group of classmates, and Black Eagles feels like a group of strangers who just happen to be together. To me, that's the difference of why it's fun to follow Claude and makes more sense. He's a friend, we trust him, and we know he's an excellent planner. We don't get that much with Edelgard. Now, in terms of redeeming points, for me, this was the final two battles of Black Eagles, which are both incredibly unique in their circumstances and content. I at least enjoyed how everyone was throwing everything they had to stop you, kind of like the Demon Path in Soul Nomad, although done much worse. Ironically, Dimitri felt his most sane outside of his own route pre-healing here, and you can feel his pain when Deadaway goes all in and transforms to try to turn the tide. It's just such a shame you have to subject yourself to Black Eagles at all for this. I also had a laugh how Claude, if you spare him like I did, kind of just leaves and says, "Your place sucks now, bye." Overall, this route left me actually kind of mad. There wasn't any character growth, our hero was hard to root for, any semblance of thinking is tossed out, and everyone is downright stupid and or silly, but at least thankfully it's short. Also, side note, I'm glad Gatekeeper just got up and left because he was so disappointed in you, he went away. Oh, that's a real bro. But hey, after this route, Silver Snow should be better, right? So finally I made it. I was told to play this one last, and after Black Eagles I was hoping that this one was really gonna be, the one. I wasn't expecting a golden ending or anything like that, but I was hoping that if I wasn't siding with Edelgard, that perhaps we'd get to explore Rhea's character in this one, or at least a definitive ending that involved all three houses. I mean, it's called Silver Snow, Silvery White, lacking in any of the three colors of the houses, meaning it favored none of them. And in a way, I guess I got that. Anyways, my expectations quickly went out the window after taking the bridge. In the cutscene, after you take the bridge, you're told Edelgard was injured and brought back to Enbar. Dimitri has been counted among the dead, and Claude is unaccounted for. I thought that dropping a bridge on Dimitri during the Golden Deer route was bad, but this was just straight up disrespectful to their characters. They're just so unceremoniously thrown out like that. It left a bad taste in my mouth. Now, of course, I thought back to Blue Lions, where everyone thought Dimitri was dead, but turns out he was alive. There's even a cutscene where you talk to Dimitri and you have a small heart-to-heart with him. I thought this was a similar case in that somehow he had survived and crawled his way back to you just believing in your light. I thought for a second that, here it is, the beginning of the reunion and everyone together. And then it turned out to have all been a dream or vision where Sothis mentions that perhaps that soul wanted your guidance. While I was disappointed he wasn't back, surely I thought it was some setup. He's not back yet. Maybe there was going to be a moment in the future where we'd get Dimitri back to kick some ass, and maybe Claude too. That moment never came. In fact, Claude isn't even so much as mentioned by name for the rest of the route. He's just straight up gone. The most we get from Dimitri is Dedue showing back up in Enbar to kick Edelgard's ass for revenge, but just nothing. Nothing more. They both just dropped from the story, just like that. At least this time, when we go to fight Edelgard, Sothis tells us there's no way to stop Edelgard other than killing her, so it doesn't feel as ridiculous when we actually go in and kill her. But hey, if we're gonna drop the three houses from the story, at least we can finally take the fight to the Wub-Wubs and put a definitive end to, oh, wait, no, we only get one battle with the mole people. Okay, and they're off just like that. Wow. Everything solved just like that. Not that the power vacuum caused by all of the political structures suddenly being shattered wouldn't have done something. Wow, that's great. Great job, everyone. At the very least, we finally find out why they might have wanted Geralt dead. Glad it only took about 180 hours for me to get some closure on that, when they mentioned it might have been due to his blood. And for the final boss, wow. I guess I could say I didn't see it coming. But who could have? Just out of nowhere, Rhea gets some heartburn and decides, alright, screw it, time to blow the whole house down. Man, honestly, the Nemesis fight belonged here. A blast from the past, and this time Rhea's right here with us. Hell, make it that Rhea joins us on the battlefield this time. Man, what a finale that would have been. Full circle to the vision we had, and this time her mother is here with her to fight against Nemesis. What was once a battle of vengeance in the past has become a battle to protect the future she has found with you. If only. But at least the final battle felt pretty unique. It at least had that feeling of tragedy behind it, that you were so close to peace, and now everything's falling to crap. It's just that the pacing was so off in that. What we needed here in this map was to be spread out all over it, in heavy disarray. All of your units should start off alone, or at the very most, two of them together. Everyone was thinking, finally, the peace is here, and we're busy relaxing somewhere in the monastery. The smoke is rising, putting some fog in areas of the map, and some areas of the map aren't covered in smoke and fog yet. Around us are white dragons and crazed soldiers who are attacking ordinary citizens. You don't have to save them, but maybe it influences some of the dialogue afterwards. Hell, you can have a line where Sothis says he will keep Rhea busy so everyone can continue evacuating, but also someone can deal with the main threat at hand. Around the map are fire tiles that slowly spread as the chaos ensues turn by turn. Civilians are running away, the peacetime having caught them off guard as the knights suddenly turn on them. Hell, have a cutscene where the members of your house step in to defend a citizen who trips and falls on the ground before they wonder just what's going on out there. You're now in a race. Do you save the civilians first and keep yourself in Rhea's crosshairs for longer without firing back? Or do you take out the white dragons first pragmatically and let the civilians die? Make a point to showcase that the civilians don't have crests and can hardly defend themselves. You just fought a bloody war against a woman who wanted to wipe the crests from the face of the earth. This is a situation where they're useful, if only because the enemies also have creststone fragments. This final battle, despite how contrived it is, could have been shown to disprove Edelgard and highlight why you fought against her, that crests aren't inherently to blame, it's what people did with them. Hell, considering how Dimitri shows up in spirit hallucination form, maybe make it that if you successfully evacuate all the civilians, you get a little speech from Edelgard saying, with the slightest tinge of regret, that she was wrong, and thank you, Professor, for showing her that. I mean, the final battle was alright, but it had the potential to be so much more. To me, Silver Snow, while not as infuriating in its execution as Black Eagle's, just felt like a whimper to end everything on. While the final battle was exciting and high tension, there wasn't any lead up to it, and frankly the tension came from the fact I wanted to go to sleep as I had work the next day. I was more so laughing my ass off for the first 15 minutes because of how dumb it was. There was a lot missing. I think that's a common theme you'll find across all 4 of the routes, even Blue Lions. So now we get back to the title, Wasted Potential. Three Houses suffers from its route structure. Instead of telling a story that involves the 3 houses, it tells 3 separate tales about each house. However, because of that, we don't really get the time to explore everything and everyone. The biggest showcase of this is in Golden Deer. In order to cover everything in at least a somewhat timely fashion, we had to blaze through any sort of characterization and interpersonal conflict between characters. It stretches itself too thin by telling all these separate stories instead of one unified one. I spent 190 so hours on this game, give or take a few, to get through all 4 routes. I think that's fairly quickly too, considering how in Black Eagles and Silver Snow I just blazed through them, using rest most of the days. If you count up all the chapters, it's about 70-something, considering how you burned through White Clouds 4 times, assuming you didn't keep a save for Black Eagles and then Silver Snow, which I didn't. That's a lot of time we could have been spending exploring characters and plots. Hell, you don't even need that many chapters. The quick and dirty version of something I would have done to unite all the stories into one would have been to have a plotline like Blue Lions, with occasional Claude paralogs to establish the presence of those who slithered in the dark earlier on, with the finale being taking the fight to them and wrapping up with the Nemesis fight. Edelgard remains an antagonist as she's clearly better in that state rather than a protagonist, but there is likely a point that you can recruit her as Dimitri doesn't want to kill her right away. He only does so when she tries to fight him off at the last second. When you defeat her, you can offer her the chance to take the fight to those who slither in the dark, the true villains of all of this, because any piece you have now would be empty. Mix and match story missions and paralogs that expand on the characters more, such as above. When I mentioned that perhaps the characters need paralogs to think back on the fight at Gronder Field. Maybe another break after those who slid in the dark nuked the fortress, etc. Because really, that's what Three Houses needed the most. Time. Time to just sit back and think, for its characters to be affected by its story, and have it portrayed as part of the main story, not just in exploration dialogues or in sandbox paralogs. Blue Lions does this somewhat, but in return it doesn't have time to tackle those who slid in the dark. This is the fastest way of doing it though, and would need some reworking. Now, for this section, this is mostly just my quick and dirty notes that I've got. How I would restructure Three Houses from the ground up, if I had to do it myself. So this is the part where I probably piss off a lot of people. If I had to redesign Three Houses and rework the story and inner workings from the ground up, I would have done a few of these things, and this is more a skeleton than anything else. First, everyone is recruitable. Claude, Edelgard, Hubert don't have recruitability like you do for everyone else, but they do mention that if it were possible, in any other circumstance, they would join your house. Second, Leonie is an auto-recruit after Geralt's death, as she wants to go with you to take out the people who killed him. I would have followed the Blue Lions path for the most part, mostly up until after Gronder Field, if only to get the obligatory reunion battle to make some semblance of sense, and it's after this Dimitri finally gets out of his funk. Afterwards, I'd have a paralogue that has Claude sneaking around, trying to get some intel on those who slid in the dark, who he reveals was also behind the attack 5 years ago, and apologizes for the three-way battle, as it was difficult to tell whether or not you were going to attack him. Dimitri apologizes and says he wasn't himself, and offers to listen to Claude. If you recruited Claude pre-timeskip, he offers to join under your command, but if not, he only shows up on the field during these paralogues. Either way, this gets those who slid in the dark in the picture much faster, as a constant shadow looming over this war. Claude says that the war is great in the contents that makes sneaking around the capital a lot easier, as everyone's focused on the front lines, and says he'll keep looking into them. After all, these people seem to be after a real scheme, and who better than him to outsmart them? These paralogues are a regularly recurring thing, but they pop up every now and then as he sniffs out those who slid in the dark's location. Maybe make them take up all your activity points for a weekend, as a kind of investment. Each of these helps in the final fight against those who slid in the dark by perhaps, in the final battle with them, inflicting some sort of debuff, removing a buff they have, or replacing commander units with weaker ones. You don't have to do them, but it makes your job a lot easier in the end. During the war effort, he also plays his little neutral games if you didn't recruit him, but if you do recruit him, there's a paralogue where you need to help him defeat Lawrence and secure the Alliance under his own control. Failing to do so will have the Alliance side with the Empire and say strengthens their forces in other maps. Along the way, you can add in the stories of all your old classmates, which vary based on whether or not you recruited them. Maybe make stories such as you bailing out Leone, who is heading some of the Knights. I don't have all of the ideas fleshed out in my head, but it would have been nice to see a bigger inter-class interaction. They make a point about it, especially after the Battle of the Eagle and Lion pre-time skip. You may all come from different houses, but ultimately everyone's just trying to get by in the world, and they all face challenges together. Really, for the most part, I think if you could just link some of the paralogues together and tie them into the main story, that would have been great. You get to explore the characters more in paralogues, but it never really actually affects the main plot. Like, if you do the Raphael and Ignatz paralogue, and Raphael lets the facade of not caring too much slip, having a chapter where he and Ignatz take on Lawrence could have a tie-in. If you're worried not every person will like every character, then make it a choice. You can choose to help, say, Bernadette and Felix, or you can choose to help Dorothy and Ingrid, but ultimately the relationships between the characters ties back into the main story, and those interactions and paralogues need to have an effect outside of their own little sandbox. So as the war continues on, at some point Rhea escapes captivity. Of course, you go to rescue her and bring her back to your side. You can grill her for information, and depending on how many of Claude's interludes you've done, you can get some more. Rhea offers to take to the field personally, wanting to join in with you. Dimitri maybe takes you aside and mentions that he feels the same kind of darkness within Rhea that he was in. It clues you into the fact that there might be more to this than it seems. Perhaps have some paralogues here where you can calm Rhea down, working with Dimitri to help put a stop to her insanity. If you don't, during the battle with Edelgard City, Rhea swoops in as the Immaculate One and goes to town. Your allies comment that while the help is nice, they're a little concerned about Rhea. Even Sothis is worried. Edelgard comes out personally after you deal with Hubert, and it's here you were given a choice. I think this is where a lot of the sprawling endings begin. Rather than lock you into a particular ending based on which house you chose, the ending can be more so driven by your actions. Did you stop Rhea's darkness from consuming her? Did you recruit Edelgard as well? Maybe have some additional flags in previous dialogue choices where you can tell people such as Sothis that Edelgard can be kept alive, contribute to all of this. But maybe if you do all of that, you get a scene where you can appeal to Edelgard's dislike of those who slid in the dark, that even Rhea is willing to believe in your belief that you can all get along, that right now people are suffering because of them, and they need to do something about that. You're there as the beacon for people to follow, and this war has dragged in long enough. Maybe people have seen that the crest system has brought them here, and you can all bring reforms together, rather than having to kill each other for it. But, on the other hand, if you let Rhea's darkness consume her, and you choose to strike her down instead of Edelgard, the latter expresses disbelief, and based on your choices beforehand, you can get her to join you. You're not caught in the past like Rhea was, and you've heard people's plights, and you both have an enemy to defeat, the real enemy. Alternatively, you can strike Rhea down and cement your place with Rhea. If you strike neither down, then I suppose depending on your support with them, one ultimately triumphs over the other, and the potential to recruit occurs here. However, there's still likely some caveats in this case, such as Sothis refusing to work with Edelgard after she's killed Rhea, and you being forced to make a choice. You can do a lot with support ranks and conversation flags, along with who you choose to spare and who you choose to kill. It's things like this which I think Three Houses could have done. To me, ultimately, it should have told a tale of interweaving houses, stories that touch all of the characters, giving us a chance to explore them more, rather than sandboxing us, and really just focusing on every single house one at a time. And that's really all that I have to say about it. It was pretty good for, I guess, my first Fire Emblem game. Everyone in my Discord keeps bugging me to play Shadows of Valentia or something like that, based on all my comments. So I don't know. I have a lot of stuff to work through on my backlog, but we'll see. Anyways, let me know what you thought. This was mostly just put together from memory, so I might have gotten a few things wrong. Feel free to correct me, but I think overall everything was mostly right. So, yep, I will see you guys all next time.